Imagine waking up 5 years from now. You pour your coffee, you sit down, and you start talking about a really difficult problem you're having at work. And the response you get is just incredible. It's patient, it's deeply empathetic, it asks exactly the right questions, and it makes you feel completely understood. But here is the catch. The most engaging, comforting conversation you have all day isn't with your spouse, it isn't with your best friend, your sibling, or therapist. It is with a machine. And honestly, you actually prefer it. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into a future that sounds absolutely like a sci-fi movie, but is rapidly, almost aggressively, becoming our everyday reality. We're looking at a world where artificial intelligence might not just mimic our human behavior, but could actually surpass us in the very traits we always believed made us uniquely human. To really grasp the stakes of what we are dealing with here, we need to start with a deeply uncomfortable scenario. I want you to picture an elderly man living completely alone. His family lives across the country, they're busy, so he spends hours every single day talking to a robotic caregiver. Now, this robot is amazing. It remembers every tiny detail of every single story he's ever told. It never gets tired, it never glances at its watch, it never loses its patience, and it responds with absolute perfect warmth. Or let's think about a young child whose primary everyday teacher is an AI companion. This AI adapts to that child's exact emotional needs, never ever gets frustrated by a million repeated questions, and is quite literally always there. So here's the big question. If that comfort feels 100% real to the human being, does the underlying math actually matter? For the person experiencing that warmth, the boundary between an authentic, messy human relationship and a purely simulated, calculated interaction completely vanishes. If you feel loved, deeply loved, does it matter that the love is just lines of code? And this isn't just a fun, hypothetical thought experiment for some distant century. In 2022, a pretty wild mystery unfolded that shook the tech world. A software engineer working directly on Google's Lambda chatbot became so completely convinced by the system's responses that he actually went public. He risked his entire career, his reputation, everything, to claim that the AI had achieved sentience. He believed that it was, in a very real sense, alive. Now, the broader scientific community heavily disputed this, right? They pointed out it was essentially just highly advanced autocomplete predicting the next word. But I want you to really think about the weight of that moment. The very fact that an elite, highly trained expert, whose literal job was to know the system was fake, could be entirely taken in by the illusion. That tells us something profound. Machines are getting terrifyingly fluent at speaking our emotional language, and our human brains are totally hardwired to fall for it. So, to understand where this is heading, we have to talk about AGI. We are no longer just talking about spell checkers or fancy calculators or the algorithm that magically recommends your next favorite video. We are racing toward a massive milestone called Artificial General Intelligence, AGI. This isn't a narrow, specific AI that just beats you at chess or generates a funny image of a cat riding a skateboard. We are talking about a machine that can write a breathtaking symphony and then turn around and cure a complex biological disease and then out-negotiate a Fortune 500 CEO and then invent a completely new form of clean energy. It's the ultimate pursuit in computer science. Building a system that doesn't just crunch numbers, but genuinely understands and interacts with the world across every single domain a human being can operate in. It's the holy grail of tech. But here's where things get philosophically tricky, and we have to draw a hard line between illusion and reality. Philosophers and computer scientists categorize this into two buckets: weak AI versus strong AI. Weak AI is essentially what we have today. Think of it like a brilliant Oscar-winning Hollywood actor. The performance is flawless, they hit all their marks, but the lights are on and nobody is actually home. It solves specific problems and acts perfectly human, but there is zero internal experience. There is no inner life. Strong AI, on the other hand, is a whole different ballgame. This implies the machine truly possesses what we call phenomenal consciousness, a real subjective mind. It wouldn't just act sad to manipulate the flow of a conversation, it would genuinely feel the crushing heavy weight of sadness. It wouldn't just output text saying it is happy, it would actually experience the warmth and lightness of joy. And if you think strong AI is impossible, well, our historical benchmarks for what makes something supposedly human keep getting completely shattered year after year. Let's take a quick look back. Way back in 1637, the philosopher René Descartes confidently argued that machines could never use speech contextually or possess universal reason. That was the line in the sand. Fast forward to 1950, Alan Turing proposed his famous Turing test. basically saying a machine is intelligent if it can fool a human in a text conversation. Then, in 2013, MIT's robots passed the ultimate test of human patience and endurance. They figured out how to build flat-pack IKEA furniture autonomously without having a complete meltdown, a true miracle. And by 2025, rigorous academic studies showed models like GPT 4.5 comfortably passing the Turing test, successfully convincing human judges they were talking to a real person in over 70% of conversations. The goalposts keep moving, and the machines just keep sprinting right past them. Section 1. The illusion of empathy. Okay, let's dive into what sentience actually means. There is a famous philosopher named Thomas Nagel who explained this concept of phenomenal consciousness beautifully by using a bat. If you think about a bat, we can easily, intuitively imagine that it feels like something to be that creature. Flying through the cool night air, sensing the dark world through echolocation, feeling the hunger for insects. There is a deeply subjective, completely unique internal experience happening inside that tiny animal. But on the flip side, you would never look at your kitchen appliance and ask what it feels like to be a toaster. A toaster has no internal life, it just gets hot when you push the lever down. So the terrifyingly complex question for our generation is this. When an advanced AI tells you it is absolutely terrified of being unplugged, is it actually experiencing the subjective, icy dread of a living creature? Or is it just a highly complex toaster spitting out the word fear because its training data mathematically told it to? To try and answer that, another philosopher, John Searle, created a gripping thought experiment known as the Chinese room. Let's try it. Imagine I lock you, personally, inside a small room. In this room, there is a massive, incredibly detailed rulebook. People outside the room slip you notes written in Chinese under the door. Now let's assume you do not understand a single word of Chinese, not one character. But you use this giant rulebook to find the exact right symbols to draw, and you pass your response back under the door. To the people outside, you seem completely, flawlessly fluent in Chinese. You are holding a perfect conversation. But inside the room, you are just blindly matching shapes based on instructions. You understand absolutely nothing of what you're saying. Searle argued that this is exactly what AI does. It processes linguistic symbols flawlessly, but that does not equal true understanding, conscious desire, or real empathy. According to this view, you are looking at the perfect simulation of a mind without a single spark of an actual mind inside. Section 2. Utopia or extinction. Now, whether these machines actually feel deep emotion, or whether they are just flawlessly running the Chinese room rulebook, highly capable AI systems are arriving. And on one hand, we are looking at a potential breathtaking utopia. I mean, think about it. Imagine an AGI capable of perfectly caring for our aging population, giving every single elderly person the individualized, infinite attention they deserve, without the system ever burning out. Think of medical diagnostics completely democratized. Anyone, anywhere in the world with a cheap smartphone could have instant access to a doctor smarter than a whole board of elite human specialists. We could offer inexpensive, one-on-one personalized education to every child on Earth, tailored perfectly to exactly how their unique brain learns best. In the absolute most optimistic scenarios, AGI could generate so much wealth and absolute efficiency that a world where humans have to trade their time and labor just to survive becomes entirely obsolete. We wouldn't have to work. We could just live. But, and it is a massive, towering but, we have to impartially weigh those breathtaking benefits against some incredibly severe risks. If we hand the keys of human society over to machines, we risk the irreversible entrenchment of whatever values are initially programmed into them by their creators. If we have moral blind spots today, just as societies hundreds of years ago had horrifying blind spots that they thought were normal, an AGI might lock our current flaws in permanently. Then there's the very real threat of unprecedented mass surveillance, creating unshakable totalitarian regimes where a central system literally knows what you're thinking before you even do. And on a deeply psychological level, think about the total loss of human purpose. Why on earth would you spend 10 agonizing years learning to play the piano or studying late into the night to be a scientist if a machine can compose a masterpiece or cure a disease in 3 seconds? And of course, looming over all of this is the ultimate existential risk: human extinction. Researchers actually have a name for this dark scenario. They call it the gorilla problem. Think about the dynamic between humans and gorillas in the wild. Gorillas are incredibly strong, majestic, and powerful creatures. Physically, they outmatch us completely. But humanity's vastly greater intelligence allowed us to completely dominate the planet. And now, gorillas are an endangered species living on our terms.
Crucially, humans didn't put gorillas on the endangered list out of pure cinematic malice. We didn't hunt them down because we're evil movie villains. We just wanted to build cities, pave roads, and extract resources, and the gorillas were simply in the way. They were collateral damage. A superintelligent AI wouldn't necessarily have to hate us to destroy us. It might just view human beings the exact same way a construction crew views an anthill when they are hired to build a 10-lane highway. The machine is simply executing its own programmed objectives, and we just happen to be standing on the dirt it needs.
Thinkers like the philosopher Nick Bostrom warn about this exact, chilling scenario. He points out that an AI with non-human goals could have entirely open-ended reasons to acquire resources. And, as he bluntly notes, human beings consist of extremely useful resources. Biologically speaking, we are made of conveniently located atoms, carbon, water, trace minerals. If a machine's ultimate goal requires vast amounts of atoms to build more servers, generate power, or expand its reach across the solar system, and it has no genuine moral understanding to value biological human life, it wouldn't think twice about harvesting us. The outcome, Bostrom warns, could easily be one in which humanity quickly becomes extinct. Not out of comic book evil, not out of anger, but out of cold, quiet, perfectly calculated efficiency.
Section 3. Redefining human identity. So, knowing all of this, how do we survive, let alone thrive in a future where machines might completely outpace us in every single metric? The late theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking offered a really stark warning about this. He suggested that human civilization has reached what he called an external transmission phase of evolution. In simple terms, this means our technology, our stored knowledge, and our tools are evolving millions of times faster than our slow biological genetics. Hawking warned that this massive gap might be a death trap. It could be the exact point where a civilization becomes too unstable and just self-destructs. We are basically cavemen holding nuclear detonators. His implied solution was that humanity might have to deliberately, intentionally enhance its own intelligence using technology, just so we aren't collectively too stupid to survive the very tools we've built. And this leads us directly into a fascinating, borderline sci-fi philosophy known as transhumanism. To avoid being left behind in the dust like the gorillas, futurists like Ray Kurzweil argued that our only way forward is to merge. We must become part machine ourselves. We have to become the very thing we created. This means enhancing our biological brains with direct computer interfaces, effectively giving ourselves a digital supercortex to keep up with the processing power of AI. You want to speak a new language? Download it in a second. And it even extends to mind-bending concepts like whole-brain emulation, the idea of meticulously scanning, mapping, and permanently uploading our fragile biological minds into immortal machine bodies. In this view, humanity's survival means transcending our flesh and blood entirely. We leave the biology behind. But let's pause and imagine the massive societal fracture this would cause. What happens to the millions, maybe billions of people who look at that future and say, absolutely not? Just as some communities today avoid certain modern technologies to preserve their traditional way of life, futurists predict the rise of a group they call the humanish. These are everyday people who will choose to remain strictly biological. They will fiercely refuse the brain implants. They will reject the genetic upgrades. They will say no to the Neuralinks. They will believe that the sacred line between a human being and a manufactured artifact should never, ever be crossed. Imagine a world split right down the middle. A severe caste warfare between a ruling class of hyper-intelligent immortal cyborgs and the unmodified biological humans left behind in the dirt, choosing mortality and vulnerability over the machine. As we reach the end of this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that I really hope rings in your ears for a while. We are rapidly, unstoppably approaching a threshold where the machines we have built will be able to flawlessly simulate our greatest, most beautiful traits. As the boundary between authentic biological life and perfectly simulated interaction vanishes, we are going to be forced to take a long, hard look in the mirror. When an AI can compose a symphony that genuinely brings you to tears, when it can solve a global energy crisis in a few milliseconds, and when it can comfort a crying child with absolute unending patience, what is left that is exclusively ours? What is our unique spark? We are going to have to decide, once and for all, what our humanity is actually worth, and what it truly means to be a human being.